Mike Bohn here in Sydney for UFC 293 with Laura Sanko, who is set to make her pay-per-view debut Saturday night in the commentary booth. Laura, this has been a long time coming for you. It's now just hours, days away. How does it feel?
It feels awesome. You say it's a long time coming, but to be honest with you, it was a big surprise. I've known about it for a few months, but when the call did come, it was actually a massive surprise to me. I didn't feel like this particular goal would get checked off probably for a few years, if I'm being honest. So I'm surprised, excited, elated now that it's here, and I'm just ready to go.
Yeah, do you feel like it was more like a product of scheduling and stuff? Because there's like Paris, Singapore, it's just been all over the place. All these people can't be everywhere at once too.
Yeah, I mean that definitely I think worked in my favor, but the UFC is a meritocracy at its core, and I know that they wouldn't put me in the spot if they didn't feel like I was ready for it, had earned it. So yeah, I'm excited. The Australian cards in particular, I always get up for. When I actually auditioned my very first time for commentary, that didn't go so well, years and years ago. It was an Izzy card, and it was in Australia, and it feels very full circle. Yeah.
What did not go well when you remember that back?
It wasn't so much. It was a lot of notes from that one. I think the biggest thing was I had yet to find my authentic voice in terms of like I had so much going on in my head that I wanted to get out, and I couldn't figure out how to just sort of like relax and talk. It was I wanted to say so much. I had so much to say, too much to say. And I think it's just taken years of doing it for the LFA and doing it for Invicta, and of course for Dana White's Contender Series and Road to UFC. You get more comfortable with it, and I found my voice and was able to finally find a channel to put all the technical knowledge, in the right moments and not just cram it down people's throats.
Right. I mean, do you watch some of that stuff back and like almost cringe at yourself? Because I look at like my early interviews from years ago, and it's like, wow, I can't believe I said that or acted like that. It was just so different.
Absolutely. I mean, I watched the early stuff of me, especially the stuff that's available on Fight Pass. You can find it. It's awful. It's so bad. When I first did television, it was for Invicta, and it was live. That literally the first time I held a mic, looked at a camera, was live. So you guys can go find that. The commentary, I feel like by the time I started really doing that, I was comfortable on TV. So that part maybe a little bit less so, but that audition in particular, I have not re-listened to that, probably for a good reason. But there were things, about that feedback that I was given on that I went to work on too. Like a lot of it was the tone of my voice, which it's hard to hear that feedback when it's like, oh, your voice isn't that great, and as a woman you kind of start to wonder like, how much can I change my how much do I change my voice? But I got a vocal coach, worked on things, just no stone unturned. It was a phrase that gets overused, but I really tried to take that approach in terms of like, okay, if there's a list of things that they didn't like, let's just go to work. Yeah.
So you've done some Contender Series cards, you've done some fight nights. Yeah. How does the preparation for an event like this differ? Do you do much different, or do you feel like you have your process already laid down and it's just another event in that sense?
I pretty much have my process laid down. I really enjoy watching the film. That to me is like the story that I get to then retell to the audience to the best of my ability, and I love seeing things that played out maybe in past fights get implemented in a new way. So anytime I can see a pattern and then see it again, and I kind of geek out about that stuff. So film watching to me, I love it. But it's a lot of work. But I treat Road to UFC, Contender Series, Fight Nights, same as a pay-per-view. So I don't think it would be possible for me to prepare more. I just have more things going on, more media.
Yes. Well, I thank you for doing this. So, can you walk us through a little bit of that tape study process? Like, I know John Anik has cue cards on end. I know some other people like stuff laid out in Word documents and different things. What do you do?
Yeah, so I have a very specific template. I mean, people are literally about to click off this video, John. They're like, oh, she's about to talk about her template. Can't wait for this.
I find it interesting, or I wouldn't have asked the questions. So.
Scintillating content. No, I have a template I use, and I watch a minimum of 3 fights, usually more like 5 fights, and always do it in reverse order. And I love seeing like the evolution of different fighters. And some fighters, the evolution looks different. Sometimes there's peaks and valleys you can see them putting pieces together in different ways. Daun Jung, interesting example. Like sometimes he wrestles like crazy and just spams takedowns, and then another fight he doesn't wrestle at all. And I find that fascinating. And I think What has made me good at talking about this sport is I've always been a naturally curious person. So I don't just say that at face value. I go, well, why is he doing that? Why would he take such a different approach? I think if you keep asking why enough times, you get to some really interesting information. Yeah.
So let's talk about UFC 293 a little bit. Obviously, Israel Adesanya putting his title on the line against Sean Strickland. This wasn't the fight that we originally thought we were going to get with Drickus, but I think it's a compelling one nonetheless. I guess we'll start with Sean, right? A lot of people counting him out in this fight, a pretty big underdog. Through your tape study, I know you can't make like official predictions or anything now that you're in the booth, but like, what does he have to do to win, do you think, some of the keys?
Yeah. Well, listen, I think Sean knows what he needs to do to win, and I do think that this is could be a more competitive fight than a lot of people are giving it credit for, because I think Sean has a particular style that, we often talk about the guys that have really flashy techniques as being hard to emulate in the gym. I would argue that Sean Strickland would be pretty hard to emulate in the gym. Not a lot of people can keep up that particular style of pace. The analogy that keeps coming into my mind, Izzy is a jazz musician. He's out there bending notes and being extemporaneous with how he expresses himself. And Sean Strickland is like thrash metal. He's in your face and he's unrelenting. And it may not be everybody's cup of tea, but it can be very effective. So if Sean can get in there and safely find a way to make this a little bit more of a messy fight, get in Izzy's face like he does everybody, but do it safely, unlike he did in the Pereira fight, maybe drag the fight out a little bit longer, which I think this will be a longer fight, actually, unless he gets slept early somehow by Izzy. Mix in the grappling. I really do think that there are not easy paths to victory for Sean, but there are paths. Sean's not going to win a kickboxing fight against Israel Adesanya, but Sean could win a fight.
Yeah, and I think maybe obviously the stats on paper don't say everything, and people look at the Pereira knockout and maybe think he has like poor defense or something, but he actually has the highest rated defensive striking percentage. So do you think that maybe that's something that's underestimated? Like maybe he doesn't win all the exchanges on the feet, but he can at least keep himself safe for longer periods of time than people think.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think the Pereira fight, I will say this, I think Sean fighting Izzy after fighting Alex only helps him, because I guarantee you he learned quite a bit from that fight, and he's trained with Alex since. And he literally, has said, listen, Alex pointed out some deficiencies. And I do think, as much as Sean comes off as this like obviously brash, kind of bullheaded type of guy, he's not dumb. And I think the biggest challenge for him in this fight will be dealing with the feint game, and how do you not bite on the feints and at the same time not react to the things that are coming your way, or react properly to the things that are coming your way. But Sean's defensive structures are something I could geek out about for a long time, because they're incredibly unique and they're not something you would ever teach someone, because of the way that he stands square and yet still uses sort of like this Philly shell style almost. It's very unique to him, which is why I think he frustrates a lot of guys that look at him and go, he basically does one thing. How can I not beat this guy? It's deceptive. It really is.
And what about Israel on the other side, right? Like, obviously he's the favorite, he's the champion. A lot of people expect him to win, but he's talked a lot about at media day, like, referencing himself as an artist and things like that. Like, do you feel like he just has to go in there and be him, or do you think to a degree, like, you could almost call this like a trap fight in a way, right? Like, well, all the expectations, it's the complete opposite of the last fight versus Pereira, where people are like, you might not win. We just saw you lose to this guy. We've seen it multiple times, and now it's the complete reversal of the roles.
I think for anybody other than Izzy, it could easily be a trap fight, but I genuinely believe that he's the type of champion who will not allow himself to think that way. I think maybe earlier in his career, a little bit less mature, he might have been one to write a Sean Strickland type off. I don't think he's at this point willing to do that, especially coming off of a defeat, against someone and not having that perfect title reign anymore. This is a guy who's not going to take his eye off the ball. And to answer your question, I do think he just needs to go out there and be himself and be the artist that he is. Because in reality, on paper, he has a lot more tools than Sean does, or at least he uses more tools than Sean does. He's talking an awful lot about the work he's been getting in with Craig Jones, so I'm anxious to see if, what if Izzy starts shooting takedowns? What if this what if we see some crazy jiu-jitsu scrambles? I think it'd be cool to see. Do I think it's the most likely thing? Certainly not early in the fight, but Izzy has a lot of ways to win this. I think Sean needs to be really smart, but I do think it will be more competitive than many people are giving it a chance to be.
Yeah, and Israel has talked about, like, I want a submission, and he did a little something at the open workout too, like showing off a little grappling scramble there too. I know it's hard to say, like, based off the tape, because we haven't really seen him attempt submissions or anything, but you kind of references there. Do you think there is a path to a submission for him?
Listen, I think anybody that spends any amount of time training with Craig Jones on an individual one-on-one basis, where Craig is basically breaking down your style and telling you what you should be doing differently. And he alluded to it when we spoke. He said, listen.
It's almost like people walking in front of the camera, people stepping on the court. Yeah, it's fun.
But really finding a way to use his length on the ground, and Craig's a master. He's a magician. And I don't know. There's not an obvious path because Sean Strickland has certainly a very underrated ground game. We never get to see that either, which is why I kind of hope we get to see both of their ground games because it's such a mystery. But we'll see.
And as far as like what could be next for this, Israel retains. Do you think it has to be the Dricus fight? Like, do we need to go to that? Or he seemed, kind of off-put by the fact that he didn't take this fight. Dana White said something after Contender Series that, I don't like guys who turn down fights. Izzy said he might have to fight twice more before the title shot. I don't know if that's gamesmanship, mind games, but like Jared Cannonier's here as the backup. We saw how Colby Covington's being rewarded for that. It doesn't seem like it's 100% of a lock.
Not a lock, but I do think that Izzy coming out and saying these are my decisions, that's gamesmanship. I mean, I don't know that he's entirely wrong. I think he does have at this point, he's earned a lot of influence over his career and will work hand in hand with the UFC like that. But I also think Izzy really wants that Dricus fight. I think there's a part of him, I think whatever it was about Dricus touched a nerve in him that so far no one really has been able to touch. Sean certainly has touched nerves in other ways, but there's something about that Dricus fight that I think compels him in a unique way. And at this point in his career, having almost cleaned out the division, you have to have you have to get up for a fight. You got to have that fire. You got to have that motivation, that nerve that gets touched. And I think it's there for him with Dricus, and I hope it happens. Who knew? Who knew that this would be the position? Because I, for one, never would have called him beating Robert Whittaker, certainly not in the way that he did. And it makes that fight with Izzy all the more compelling.
Absolutely. And yeah, Izzy told me last week that he thinks that's one of the most important fights in UFC history. That could be debated, but it is a big one. So as far as elsewhere on this card, the co-main event, Tai Tuivasa, Alexander Volkov, just quickly on that, I mean, Tai's lost the past couple in a row. He took a long layoff, comes back with the long hair and stuff, different look. What do you think is like the challenges for both guys in this? Tai's had success against like a Stefan Struve before, but Volkov, I think, uses his length and weapons a lot better than a Struve did. He
does. And Volkov's a real big challenge in the heavyweight division. He's got a unique skill set, the way that he's able to fight long and use those long-range weapons, the front kicks, the teeps, and those have been trouble for Tai in the past. But the interesting thing is they sort of play to each other's weaknesses a little bit on both sides. Volkov has struggled with guys that are compact and super fast and agile, exactly like Tai Tuivasa is, and that's the biggest advantage that he has in this fight, the power and the speed. I mean, if you don't watch Tai Tuivasa fight and think, oh my gosh, that's Mark Hunt, then you're crazy. And we saw the type of things that Mark Hunt was able to do, and such a similar skill set. The height is always a challenge, but as you say, he has faced an even taller opponent before, maybe not as adept at using the long-range weapons, but I think Tai has spent the year working hard on setting up his entries a little bit more, which if he can just throw a little bit more filler in there before he gets that bomb ready to go, he's going to be tough for anybody to deal with.
Sure. And there's some other things we could talk about on the card. 7 city kickboxing fighters, some debuts, all that stuff. The last thing I did want to ask you, you're going to be calling a championship fight. It's a different kind of pacing with the pay-per-view. Like, how are you kind of preparing to maybe not like gas yourself out, so to speak, like earlier in the card, and save yourself to give a championship fight the type of energy and appreciation it deserves in the moment?
Well, I'll tell you a secret, and this is me really showing myself here. I learned pretty early on, because my husband told me that, and these were his words, no one wants to hear a woman scream on television. So if you'll notice, if you listen closely, I almost never yell at a finish, because he's not wrong. No one wants to hear, oh my God! Not that I would say it like that, but the way I save my voice is waiting for the moments where I can come in and contribute to a big moment, but I try not to hit the big moments too hard, and that's really kind of the key, is just the energy will not be a problem, though. The energy will not be a problem. If anything, people are going to be like, wow, that chick needs to chill out. That unbridled enthusiasm needs to get bridled back up, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's good to have the raw emotion. You clearly are very passionate about this. You've worked your ass off to get to the spot, so congratulations, and looking forward to seeing how it goes down Sunday morning here in Sydney, Saturday night back in the U.S. on pay-per-view, UFC 293. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.